Hello everyone, it's Neil here, and well, what we're going to discuss today is unpacking the rubrics. And if you're unfamiliar with rubrics or haven't used them before in the past, hopefully you have. I'm sure you have if you've made it this far in your program. But basically, I'll give you my perspective. As a learner, I really enjoyed getting rubrics before my assignments because I knew exactly what I needed to include to get the grade that I wanted. And this screenshot that you're looking at right now is from your handbook. And if you look through, for the edTPA, there are 15 rubrics. 15. I have never completed an assignment with 15 rubrics, but that's what we're doing here. And as you can see, they go from level 1 to level 5. And our goal is level 3. And again, by no means associate that with the C. That's where you have to start. That's where you need to be to successfully complete this. So I'm just going to scroll through here, and for task 1 there are 5 rubrics, and today we're just going to discuss rubric 1. And my goal is to create these short video segments for each rubric, so that would be 15 of these. You guys are going to be sick of me by the end of this, but the first rubric is about planning for the whole child, and there's a document that I've been working with and found that breaks down the rubric in language that might be a little more understandable, a little bit easier to follow, so hopefully it'll give you a clear picture of what you have to do and some ideas on where to go. So again, my advice is look at these rubrics, look at these documents and the videos I'm creating for you before you start writing, so you know where you're heading. It gives you a direction, and you can kind of maybe use them as a checklist as you write your work or write your commentaries or write your lesson plans, and make sure that you have all these things accounted for. Okay, so now you're going to see words, and I've been debating on how to do this with you guys and came up with all these different things, but you know what, the best way to do it, we're just going to get into the rubric and and just get into it. So you're going to see words like developmentally appropriate practice, promote language and literacy development in an interdisciplinary context, and take into consideration active and multimodal nature of children. What? Okay, so the first rubric says, how do candidates' plans build on each other to support children's language and literacy development through active multimodal learning? And again, I mean, some of the language is not necessarily user-friendly, but that's what this document is for and what I'm here for, to help you work through some of those issues. So I'm not going to read everything verbatim, but you're going to see words also like central focus, which means like the theme of your lesson, and the standards and objectives, which you're very familiar with, and learning segment, which basically means a series of 3 to 5 lessons. That's what it means. A mini unit, if you want to call it that. But the words learning segment are used to describe the lesson plans you teach that build on one another. And the promotion of language and literacy is definitely important, and the active and multimodal nature of children is important, and interdisciplinary context is important. So some key concepts: aligned and significant content and accuracy. So aligned, standards, objectives. Are your plans aligned with the state standards and your objectives and strategies? Do they make sense for what you're trying to teach? Okay. And are there significant content inaccuracies? Maybe in your commentary you're writing something that is not accurate, or in your lesson plans you want to make sure. This is where we talked about using evidence and including that in your writing, and specifics. You want to be specific and provide as much evidence as possible. Okay, so let's just go on. And you're going to have time. I'm going to send you this document for you to read over, and you can ask me questions always. But the word multimodal, I know the first time I heard it, I wasn't quite sure what they were talking about. I thought I did, but I wasn't quite sure. But here's basically what it means. It refers to the full range of domains that impact children's development and thinking, cognitive, social, emotional, and physical. So nurturing those domains, you're going to engage their senses. You're going to use a bunch of approaches to learning for integrated, meaningful experiences that build on their interests, nurture their curiosity, and respond to their own unique styles. Think maybe learning styles, multiple intelligences, etc. So think of all the different ways that you can approach one topic that are going to meet the needs of all your visual learners, your auditory learners, your kinesthetic learners. Think of it that way. And you're going to challenge them to grow. You're going to want to take them where they are, and your lessons are meant to make them grow by the end. And then interdisciplinary. If you see that word, you are going to see that word. You do see that word. It refers to learning experiences that include connections across disciplines such as math, science, social studies, or language and literacy concepts. So say you're reading about bears in language arts. You're reading about Corduroy the bear or something like that. And maybe you would take that to a science concept where you would integrate where real bears live and what they eat, or that sort of thing. So those are making the connections across the content areas in interdisciplinary instruction. Okay, so those are authentic learning experiences. Everything has to be authentic, and you want it to be language and literacy focused. Okay, and then you have a glossary in the handbook that gives the definitions of terms like central focus, learning experience, learning segment. We discussed those. And this is key right here. So evidence. Remember, we talk about basically everything you say. I had a professor once who told me, you don't know enough yet to have an opinion. And after I got over my anger, because I thought, well, should have an opinion because I'm paying enough to go to school here that it's worth something. I understood what she meant years later, but let me save you some time. Evidence doesn't mean that we don't believe you, doesn't mean that that what you're saying isn't true, but you have to substantiate. Think of yourself as a lawyer. You can't make a claim in a courtroom with a judge and a jury without having evidence to back it up. It's the same thing. Everything you say has to have rationale behind it or evidence, and you have to be specific and explicit about that evidence. Okay, here's your primary sources of evidence for meeting the requirements of Rubric 1. Yes, this is Rubric 1. Context for learning, and you should be familiar with that now because you wrote lesson plans with the context for learning. In this particular experience, the edTPA, you're going to write a context for learning, but not in your lesson plans, but you're going to write it. So you're familiar and ready for that. You know what to include. And then also your planning commentary, prompt 1A through D. You'll see what all this stuff is. So have this document ready. These are what the people who are grading you are going to be looking at. Okay, well, do they have all those things that we told them to have in these primary sources of evidence? And then they're going to look over your lesson plans and instructional materials. So you want to be as detailed as possible. In this document, there are each rubric, whenever the grader looks at it, the person grading your work looks at it, there are criteria for an automatic 1. Obviously, we do not want that to happen. I'll let you look over that, and again, it's consistent content inaccuracies, meaning you keep making the same mistake or you say something that isn't necessarily true. So make sure you're well researched and you know what you're teaching and you know that content well. Alright, now what we're doing is we are shooting for a 3, and then obviously we want a 4 or 5, but we start with 3. We do not start with a 2 or 1, and I hope that makes sense because 3 is passing, 2 or 1 is not, and so that's where we're going to start. And if you see these bold words like plans are logically sequenced, plans are in a linear sequence or non-linear sequence, which each learning experience builds on the previous one. So you want to think of it as a series of steps that you're moving students up and learning content or a topic or concept, and you're building on each learning experience. Okay, and then you're making connections, and but not only are you making connections, don't assume that your reader knows what those connections are. Don't assume anything. Write it out, and you do that in your commentary and explicitly written in your plans or commentary. Tell us what you're doing and why you're doing it. Always provide that evidence and rationale. Get in the habit of that, and then adding citations to your work. Okay. The candidate specifically identifies the multiple modalities of learning and opportunities for active learning. So what are you doing, and do you identify in your commentaries or plans what you have to meet the needs of your visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learners, or the different types of learners that you teach? So whatever approach you decide to take as far as differentiated instruction, that sort of thing, do you specifically identify how you're hitting on the multiple modalities that students learn? Okay, and be sure to pay to that. Be sure to pay attention to that multimodal nature aspect of your plans and commentary. Okay, and then below a 3, we're not even going to think about that because none of you are going to get below a 3, but this gives you an idea of what a score of a 1, 2, or 3 look like, and kind of some things. You guys, you see the words like fleeting or vague or one modality instead of multimodal, one modality. So whenever you're writing your work and composing your work, you're going to want to make sure that you hit that multimodal nature. All right. And then this section also that tells you what an automatic score of 1, if that's given, and why. It gives you the rationale behind that. But again, you want to focus on, start with the 3, and then look here above 3. This is where you want to be. You want to be at the 3 and then work for above it. Why not? Evidence that demonstrates performance above a level 3. You provide explanations of how the planned learning experience facilitate active learning in young children. Learning experiences are interdisciplinary. The language and literacy development components are there, and include the use of one or more modality for learning. Okay, so and then you go from above the 3, and then they dig even deeper into explanations and what distinguishes a 4 from a 5, and it goes on and on. So you know exactly what you have to have. And each one of these rubrics, as you can see, this is rubric 2. Each one of these little videos that I'm going to do, I'm going to go over some of the. I'm mostly going to spend my time on introducing the rubric and the primary sources of evidence and how to score a 3. That's what I want to focus on because of time. If we had all the time in the world, I would go through the whole thing. But right now, for our purposes, we're going through the rubrics. We're going to discuss what they are, the main questions, key concepts, some vocabulary that you need to know, and primary sources of evidence, or how you're going to prove that you met or answered that question. You're going to use these primary sources of evidence to answer this question in each of these rubrics. Okay? And the goal is 3. I'm not saying stop there. You guys are awesome. You're all 3, 4s, or 5s. But that's where we're going to focus. We're not going to think about this. You guys can probably already guess that things like content inaccuracies, vague and unclear, are what will distinguish a 3 from a 2 or a 1. So you're going to want to focus on that 3 and above. And here is information on that. Okay, guys, that will do it for rubric 1. Let's move on to rubric